Okay, so in this reflection, we will discuss what I learned from facilitating the collaborative problem solving process with my group of. With my teacher group, and how I use this learning in the future, and what I need to continue to develop as a instructional leader. So this activity centered around identifying a instructional concern at our junior high. So we have to. One of the things that we did was we analyzed data collaboratively, and my job was guiding teachers through a structured decision to determine those next steps. So when you ask me, Earpsha, what did you learn from this entire activity? I will tell you a plethora of things. First, through this activity, I learned that leading instructional conversations requires intentional structures and emotional intelligence and clarity of purpose, right? And one of the biggest lessons I learned is that the data alone does not drive change. A guided conversation around that data does. When teachers are presented with numbers without context or space to process the conversation, it can become defensive or surface level. However, when I facilitate the discussion, in a way that allows teachers to reflect and ask questions, and connect the data to classroom experiences, the conversation, it became real, it became productive, it became solution oriented. I noticed that we didn't have just our PD voices on, but we actually had true, authentic, you know, teachers sharing their experiences and things that was going on. And I also learned the importance of psychological safety. So teachers are way more willing to engage in that honest conversation when they feel the purpose of the conversation is to improve, whether rather than eva um rather than evaluation. So when teachers noticed that we weren't like, I'm trying to get you, I'm trying to tell what you're doing wrong, like I said, they begin to have those honest and open conversations with me. When I tell you the conversation, it blossomed because at first I was worried. I didn't want my teacher to feel like, oh, she's just doing this for an assignment. I actually chose a true problem that we had, and how I could solve it, because I know that is one of the issues at our campus is that we know this issue, but what are we going to do, to solve it? And I don't think even other teachers even understand that the intentionality that I put in using different teachers and content areas to solve this problem. In this activity, one of the things that helped to shift and maintain student outcome instead of their personal accountability, there were some things that honestly my teachers, great teachers, we all realized that we were experienced teachers, and that's a common name through our campus, is that our campus does hire experienced people, is that we realize is that some of the things they weren't taught, they just didn't have the expertise in that specific field. And so having these conversations made it like, oh, okay, now how do we solve this? And so additionally, I learned that as a leader, like, I must balance listening and guiding, because there were times where I was on fire and then I realized that the conversations were sparked, so I just kind of had to back away and I just had to let the discussion, I facilitated, but I just let the discussion flow naturally. And that was that moment. It was my aha moment for me, and I realized that the conversation, it could have drifted, it could have, at that moment, it could have lost its momentum, but it began to pivot, and it began to pivot into these conversations that, this was, it requires active monitoring with both content and tone, for me as the future principal. And so my next bullet point is, how will I use what I learned in the future? In the future, I will use what I learned by becoming more strategic in how I prepare and lead collaborative data conversations. So I realized one of the things that I used for buy-in to get my people was that I provided refreshments, and my teachers were more willing to participate, but also they realized that I intentionally selected them. They realized that this wasn't just something that she's doing for class, but hey, she actually put some thought behind this, and they became more aware. So in the room, we had a special education teacher, we had a science teacher, we had a math teacher, we had a science, RLA teacher, and so having teacher, and we also had a social studies teacher. So having those teachers from those core content areas, they realized that we have multiple distributions of knowledge throughout our campus. And some of us, we don't really get to interact with each other as much as because of just logistics and things around the campus. And so they're just actually coming around and hearing each other's thoughts. We realize like this is something for me. I realize like this is something powerful that I want to use, once I become principal plumber. And so second, I will continue to prioritizing structured protocol for decisions. Not just saying we have a problem and I'm going to solve it, but actually involving some of my stakeholders, involving some of my teachers into those panels, and actually letting them help, you know, and listen to what they're saying, and this prevents the conversation from being overwhelming. And moving forward, I'll be more intentional with question techniques that push deeper thinking while still maintaining that clarity. Third, I'll be more mindful of emotional component of an instructional leader. Change can feel threatening, if we be honest, and as a future principal, I recognize that my tone, body language, and framing will significantly impact teacher buy-in. And I realized that once the teachers realized that I was just here, I was just listening to them, and I would chime in, it became, honestly, it was more so of a conversation. It was more so of just a bunch of teachers just having a conversation. And so my next point is, what activities or experiences do I need to bring my learning to the next level? So to further grow, I need continued opportunities to facilitate these conversations, these very intentional instructional conversations, might I add, across different grade levels, across different subject areas. So leading one group is valuable, but leadership requires adaptability. And I would also benefit from observing campus administrators as they conduct data meeting and post-observation conferences, and seeing how seasoned leaders navigate resistance, clarify understanding, and maintain focus would deepen my skill set. So additionally, I need to strengthen my ability to connect data, conversations, and measurable action plans. So while discussion is important, it's great. The ultimate goal is implementation and monitoring, and I want to continue to develop those skills in creating SMART goals and defining progress, monitoring checkpoints, and evaluating instructional impact over time. And so lastly, I want more experience receiving feedback on my facilitation style, and reflection is powerful. I know that external feedback will help me to identify some of the blind spots that I may not see as a leader, and also help me to refine my leadership presence. So closing, overall, this whole opportunity was great for me, and it's honestly, I've learned it's not about having all the answers, but it's about creating the experience and facilitating an environment where collaborative problem solving is being used as a tool to drive our data decisions, and guiding teachers toward that the actionable improvement. Like, what can we do in our classroom with this experience? Thank you.